Okay. So anyway, anytime that you have a fact that you're going to state, you're going to want to point it to whatever source you got that from. Okay. So pretty simple stuff. It looks messy. It probably looks like something that you're unfamiliar with. That's okay. Do it as often as possible. That's going to reduce the chance that you might encounter with plagiarism. Okay. Many of you are going to go on to do APA papers. It's very important that you don't get caught plagiarizing something, okay, which is, believe it or not, easy to do, and you might do it accidentally, all right, but it could lead to some serious ramifications with the university if somebody calls you out for plagiarism. So do this often, cite your sources frequently. Now, another common mistake that I noticed with this is some of you said everybody knows that gender identity issues lead to depression, just as an example. That's great, but you're assuming that everybody knows that, and maybe not everybody does. So what you're doing is you're stating an assertion to a fact that you haven't qualified. All right, so it looks unprofessional. It's kind of the wrong term or the wrong tone for a professional APA paper. So what you'll want to do with that is, if you have some kind of vague idea that gender identity, for example, gender identity leads to higher rates of depression and anxiety, for example. Okay. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but I'm using it as an example. Say, I want to say that. I'm going to go out, I'm going to look for a source that confirms that, a credible source from the Kemp Library or from some other credible review article or something like that, that you're going to want to pull that from that and state gender identity, blah, 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 blah. And then you put within that your in-text citation, and then cite that in your resource page below. Okay. Is everybody clear on that? Like I said, it looks tedious and you're putting a lot of citations in. That's very, very necessary. And it adds to your page count eventually. So the more you got in there, not only the better qualified your statements are going to be, but you're also filling in some space to get you your page count. Does that make sense? Any questions on that part? Okay. Moving on. So as you can see, any of you that are going into your doctorate degree, this is what your final paper will look like. So lots of fun there. I think this came in at just, it was like 80 some pages or 100 pages, I forget. Aren't you glad you didn't have to do one of these papers this year? Still going. All right. There we go. All right. So in the reference page, okay, reference pages, they're not called works cited pages. They're not called sources. They're called references. So I think very few of you actually put references there. If you did, congratulations. If you didn't, make sure you fix that. I gave you feedback as to what this should be. So it should be on a separate page after your last page of text. Okay. Again, double space, no single space, no space between the references at all. Okay. So just double space. Hanging indents. What that means is it's a reverse indent. Like here, you have an indent, right? Where it's indented with the first line, and then everything else is justified to the left of the 1-inch margin. For your hanging indent, very simple. It's going to be opposite of that. So your first line is going to be to the 1-inch margin, and every line after that is going to be, indented. I don't know why. Just clicked on something and it opened something up. So anyway, these references should be alphabetized according to last name. Okay. So if you don't have a last name, by the way, and I noticed this was another common issue, some of you put the title. Okay. No, again, no quotes in the title, but you put the title first and then the organization after the date. It should be organization or author. Okay. It should be date. It should be title. And then whatever publication that's in. So Washington, D.C., actually, that's the location. If I were to find an actual article here, so for example, Boccaccini and others. So I have all of them listed. I have the date. I have the title, which is not in italics. And then I have the publication, which is in italics, okay? And then I have the journal number and the journal volume. Okay, and then even the pages in there. So that's what your reference page should look like. All right. Any questions on that? Does this help clarify a little bit?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. All right, great. All right. Any other questions on the feedback that you might have received or anything with the paper in general? All right. So let's talk about motivation today. I mean, I see many of you are motivated to be in here, right? What is motivation? Your book defines motivation as the process by which activities are started, directed, or continued to meet physical or psychological needs. Okay. What do you think I mean by physical needs? What could motivation have to do with physical needs, do you think? Any takers? What physical needs might motivate us?
Hunger.
Hunger. Okay, that's a good example. What else?
Shelter.
Shelter. Okay, is that what you said? Shelter.
Yep.
Okay, absolutely. So meeting our physical and psychological needs is really the bottom line of motivation. And we do that through one of two ways. We either have intrinsic motivation or extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic. So intrinsic is simply internal. We're internally motivated to doing something. And extrinsic are rewards or punishments even that come from the outside, comes from outside that person. So what are some examples of things that you might be intrinsically motivated to doing? Maybe a hobby or something like that. Does anybody have an example of that?
Lifting weights.
Say again?
Lifting weights.
Stay awake?
No, lifting weights.
Oh, lifting weights. Okay, absolutely. That could be. What's your reason for, do you lift weights?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, what are some reasons you do that?
Because I want my body to look good. That's one. Or like I'm doing it for football.
Okay, so you're getting kind of an outside reward to do that, right? And I'm not saying that you're not somehow intrinsically motivated to doing that, but it might be a little bit more extrinsic if you're getting something for it. How many of you enjoy reading? Is there anybody out? You do? Okay. What is it about reading that you enjoy doing?
I don't know. I just like to do it.
Okay, yeah, there's no reason for it, right? You're not getting paid to read anything, right? You're not getting graded or anything like that. Nobody's giving you any kind of attention for reading. You might enjoy doing that. I don't know if you can see behind me, I have a bass guitar, an acoustic guitar, and occasionally in between classes, if I have a few minutes and I'm not setting up for anything, I'll sit in my chair and play a little bit of bass or guitar. That's something I like doing. I don't get rewarded in any way to do that, except to maybe reduce my stress a little bit, which is internal, right? So when we look at extrinsic reasons for doing things, what are we thinking of? What are some reasons? What are some ways that we are extrinsically rewarded externally?
Money.
Money's the big one, right? I always like to use this example with my students. Why did you go to college? Who cares to go down this rabbit hole with me? Why do we go to college? Is anybody intrinsically motivated to going to college? Not hearing anything. Go ahead, Gene.
I totally forgot what I was gonna say.
That's okay. I guess why? What are some reasons some of you go to college?
To be successful.
Successful, okay.
To better.
To get a job in the
Get,
future.
get a job, okay. All right. What else?
Broaden your knowledge for different jobs.
Broaden knowledge, okay. All right.
Live comfortable.
Okay, broad enough. I'm going to put a pin in that, okay, because we're kind of missing a step between is going to college, living comfortably. You're going down the path. I don't know who that was. I think it was Erica. You're going. What's that?
I said sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. Yeah, you're absolutely right because we look at success and jobs and broaden our knowledge as a means for living comfortably, right?
Yeah.
What does living comfortably mean? What does that mean for you?
I don't know, like to not struggle in life, provide for my future kids, to have a roof, always have dinner on the plate.
Okay, future, right? Job, I'm sorry, home is what I heard in there. Food, right? Making sure that your needs are being met, right? So we have equated living comfortably. I meant to actually put in here dollars because we all associate college with more dollars. Otherwise, why would we do that, right? So we have learned in our society that going to college can lead us to different goals, kind of broaden our knowledge a little bit, if you will, broaden our horizons and be able to provide for our family down the road, right? We all build towards something that's kind of programmed into us from a sociological standpoint early on in life. And so we in turn have equated college with future home. We've tied that with our biological needs. And I'll get into that when I talk about Maslow here in just a little bit, okay? Biological needs, all right? That's what we've done. We've done that with college. Now, once you've gone to college, you know, a lot of other things are gonna happen and you're gonna reassess what is live comfortably, because right now, I'm sure many of you are probably living on ramen hanging out with the friends that have the car, so you don't have to afford gas money, right? And I'm not picking on you. Heck, I went to college. I know what it's like. You're spending all your money on college and you don't have a lot of money for anything else, and that's okay. But once you get a job, then your motivations kind of change. Your needs change, and maybe you're not so worried about home and future and food because you have all those needs met and you're able to work yourself up to another level on maybe self-esteem or getting better at your job or starting to appreciate art a little bit more or something like that. And again, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself with Maslow's theory, but that's okay. So within the theories of motivation, we have two that your book highlighted, and I just kind of want to break them apart and describe them a little bit, okay? Because it's very important to understand the differences and likenesses of the two. And the two that I'm going to highlight today is the drive reduction theory and the optimal arousal. Oh, oops, sorry. Okay, so these are two theories that are different but very similar in some way. So within the drive reduction theory, what we're looking at is any kind of biological stressors that we're experiencing, okay? For example, we may have a need for something. In the drive reduction, there's a need for something. And that need creates a drive. So our drive is basically our need. It leads to some kind of psychological tension and physical arousal to make a change, all right? So let's use an example. Let's say, that this is your hunger scale, okay? Now within this hunger scale, we're usually right about here, right? After we've eaten, a while after we've eaten, things are pretty normal for us. If you can imagine this scale, this indicator as kind of like a thermostat in your house, where if it gets too low, it kicks in and does something. Usually it kicks on the heat, right? If it gets too high, then it might kick on the air conditioner or kick off the heat, one of the two. But anyway, you have this area within the middle where we are really aiming to be. So let's say, for example, if we're looking at hunger, we'll call this hunger. Our need is food. Our drive or our behavior is seek food. Okay. So we got to, what time is it? About 2:30 now, and maybe somebody out there has not eaten lunch yet. Your body starts to recognize this, right? Your blood sugar drops. It starts releasing hormones in your body, activating other areas of your body, like your stomach. Your stomach is probably moving around and growling, searching for food, whatever food it can produce, because it's looking for any kind of nutrients to sustain operations of your body, right? So your body goes through this process, and as soon as your stomach's activated, it starts releasing chemicals to your brain saying, hey, we got something going on here. We need to do something about it. And that kicks in your drive to seek food. So let's look at this. Oops. Let's look at this. Say we've hit the low point of the scale. And the longer we go without food, the lower this thermostat goes, right? Because we haven't found food yet. So we're getting into the hunger stage, right? We're experiencing hunger. So our body kicks in, it says, we need to do something about it. And if you remember back when we're talking about operant conditioning and learning and even classical conditioning, we have developed a skill set within our brain, within our schema, to go out and seek food. We do that automatically. It's part of our biological system to remember where we got food before, and we're going to go out and we're going to get it again. So we do that. We satiate ourselves, and we get maybe. Has anybody gone to the grocery store like hours after they were supposed to eat and really hungry? What happens?
You buy stuff you don't need.
Right, we go a little bit overboard, right? So let's say you're a fast eater and you go over to Jersey Mike's and you get their super duper Jersey Mike style sub, right? And that's not something you would normally eat. So now you've kind of entered this realm here, which is discomfort. Okay, might have to loosen a belt button or a belt notch or something like that, just to kind of expand your stomach because you've eaten so much, right? So it goes the opposite end of that direction. So we've kind of overshot our goal of being here in the middle, and we've gone to the opposite end of the direction. So what do? If we overeat, we might sit down for a little bit. We might take a nap. We might maybe go walk it off. Whatever it is you learn to do to reduce that discomfort, you will, in order to achieve this middle ground, which we call homeostasis. Okay, and that's where we feel no need to act in any way, or we're not driven to do anything. We're just existing. We feel good about ourselves. Okay, so that's drive reduction theory. Now, when we get into looking at mental health issues, okay, and how people respond to different stressful events, for example. I do see this a lot with anxiety, people that experience anxiety. And if you think about drive reduction theory, it really delves into what we know about reducing physical discomfort, right? In this case, we talked about food. But when we look at anxiety, we strive for that very same thing, right? If we have something that is too activating for us, say we have a lot of homework or we've got a lot of responsibilities put upon us that we need to act on, that's uncomfortable for us. We feel our stress level, and therefore our drive is to reduce that amount of stress that's in our lives. Okay. Likewise, and we're going to kind of look at, and this kind of fits in with the optimal arousal theory, I'm going to use the homeostasis model similar to that, okay? Because what the optimal arousal theory states is that we have a need to want to go out and do something, all right? So, and I can kind of relate to this, maybe over the weekend. I can't relate to this because I'm always busy. But if I were to sit in my armchair for an entire 2 days and maybe just not watch anything or not doing anything, my mind tends to get a little squirrely, right? I want to do something. I start getting punchy. I get some cabin fever. I want to get out and do something and hang out with people or socialize or whatever it is. I am kind of pushing this boredom, okay? We can see this as boredom. So according to optimal arousal theory, is once we get bored, we start seeking out things on our own without any kind of motivation. And this kind of talks about the intrinsic motivation category, right? Things that we want to do because we want to do that, not because we're getting any kind of reward out of it, but because we want to avoid boredom. We want to avoid sitting around and not thinking or doing nothing, okay? So we aim to kind of get back into this range of where things are pleasurable enough for us. We have some high task demands, but we don't have too many, because if we do, then we start pushing this end of the scale, right? Which is, we would consider activating, like too activating almost, okay? So does that make sense? Does that kind of illustrate what the difference is between drive reduction and optimal arousal? They're very similar. They're very different, but they're very similar. One's reducing stress, and the other one is kind of inducing stress a little bit when we don't have anything going on. Okay. We good? All right. So the last thing that I kind of want to cover here today is Maslow's theory of hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory. Whew, that's a mouthful. So we'll, Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory. And what this simply states, and many of you that are going into management or education or even counseling, this is very important, and it's a model that we really look at today. It's very simplistic in its nature. It does have some limitations to it, but for the most part, it does describe meeting certain needs before we can rationalize working on somebody else's other needs. So we really have 3 tiers that we look at, okay? At the very top is self-fulfillment. No, put self. All right, so self-fulfillment, which I'll get to in a minute. The bottom, at the very bottom, we have biological needs. And then in the middle, we have psychological needs. Okay, so according to Maslow, we need to fulfill each one of these, sometimes in order, before we can really move on to the next level. Okay, now you might see throughout your studies, you might see different variations of this scale, okay, of this pyramid. This one has probably more than I've seen any textbook that provides. Like, for example, cognitive needs and aesthetic needs are really combined into one. Esteem needs, that's its thing. Belongingness and love needs, that's usually on the scale, and safety needs and physiological are sometimes on one level as well. But so anyway, this is just the example that this book gives you, but I think it's very accurate because it does show the biological, psychological, and self-fulfillment in those orders. So biological needs, we really need to be able to feel like we're able to satisfy our hunger. Some of you talked about going to college because that relates to better jobs, and better jobs means living comfortably. Living comfortably means having more money. More money means that you don't have to worry about where your next meal or paying your water bill or having a roof over your head or being able to sleep comes from, right? And that really speaks to safety needs as well, feeling safe and secure and out of danger. Now, even though you have a good house, maybe you have a house, but maybe it's not in a great area where you're constantly under fear that somebody might, you might have a home invasion or something like that. That's a real thing. So even though you do have adequate shelter, you may not feel safe in that, which might be a problem, right? Especially considering like somebody that might be in an abusive home, either as a child or as a spouse or partner. That might be a problem that would lead to feeling that they can achieve these other needs as well. So anyway, getting these biological needs met is very, very important before we move on. Now, some of you that are going into management, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you an example of therapy for me. If I have somebody, and I have this all the time that comes in, they'll come in, they'll sit across from me in the chair, and they'll talk to me about how they want to do better in their jobs. Okay, they really they want to get promoted. They just got a job, let's say at the bowling alley, and they want to be the owner of the bowling alley, right? They want to take that next level up. And then I talk to them, I do my clinical interview, and I find out that they are struggling to make ends meet. They're currently not getting paid enough to even keep their house. They're worried about feeding their 2 children. Maybe they have a really stressful relationship, right? So these needs are not being met. So does it make sense that from a therapeutic model that I'm going to help them get promoted? Does that make sense? We need to meet all of these before we can really focus on a person's need to explore and understand and do better at their job, okay? And for those of you that are in management, you might want to consider that too. If you see somebody's work performance starting to slide, is it really work? Is it something that's going on at work, or is it something in their home life? And coming from the military, that's something that I was very attuned to. Is if I saw somebody's work performance slipping, or they're showing up to work late, I looked at is there something else going on down here? Because when these aren't met, that puts us under extreme stress, and it could lead to some very, very bad things. That dysfunction side of the dysfunction factor when it comes to mental health diagnosis, if that makes sense. So anyway, that's really the gist of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is we have to fulfill each need before we can move up. Now, one of the limitations to Maslow's theory is this little factor here, self-actualization. Based on his description and many other theorists that came after that, self-actualization is very, very, very rare. And I'm talking like 0.5 to 1% of the population actually feel like they found themselves fulfilled and reached their whole potential. So the problem with this is it makes people assume that they're going to get self-actualization, when indeed most people really only reside in this realm here, self-esteem and cognitive needs. Maybe some of them will get up to aesthetic needs, having a more appreciation for beauty and organization and symmetry. I don't even know what that means, symmetry. I think they're just talking about having some kind of organization in their lives. But for the most part, very few people get to self-actualization, okay? Maybe they strive for it, but chances are, according to Maslow's theory, very few people get to that point, okay? All right, any questions on Maslow's theory? There are some other really great, and I was kind of hoping for some time to show the video. I don't think we're going to get to it today, but if you check on D2L under resources, there's a great video called The Puzzle Box, and it's by Dan Pink, and it talks about motivation. It talks about what motivates people. And if you're going into some kind of management or restaurant and tourism or something like that, when you're going to be dealing with people, what motivates us? And what he really points out is that people that, if we have a task that's in front of us that's really mundane and mechanical and easy to do, if you reward somebody by giving them money to do something, they're going to do that a lot quicker. But when it comes to creativity, the more money actually stifles a person's ability to do well on that task. So anyway, really great video. If you get a chance, go out and check it out on D2L for this week under resources. Hopefully, hopefully you get to do that. Any questions? Did this help kind of describe some of these theories a little bit better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Angelise. I just like getting a response once in a while. It's kind of good. All right, so if there's nothing else, that's really all I have today. I will resume on Friday. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, rest of the end of the week, and I'll see you back here on Friday.